This is Reverend Dr. Michael Vanderpool, intuitive astrologer, and today I'm going to speak a little bit about the astrology of heartbreak and some real-life stories and experiences that, in sharing, will help to spread a little bit more light on the kind of astrological consultations that I do and some of the possible benefits from having that awareness and insight as to both in past times that we've had such heartbreak transits and also in looking ahead at when we might experience those again. And so I'll start with one story in which I got a phone call and someone close to me was crying, sobbing, and they had just experienced a breakup. And so I checked the Magi Astrology chart and saw that they had a Saturn opposition Chiron transit just ended. And so as they began to explain that they just had this breakup and the circumstances surrounding that, not only did I look at the astrology going on at that date and that time, but also looked ahead about a month and a half and saw that whatever was happening now with this peaking out of a heartbreak transit, there was basically not any real stress or hard transits or hard aspects, stress aspects in the chart about 45 days out. And so she asked me, so what does that mean? Does it mean that that we'll be back together? And you know, a heartbroken person, the whole idea of heartbreak is that it's pain, it's emotional pain, and it's also usually oftentimes with some bewilderment or feeling of loss, grief, confusion. Some people can describe it as a feeling of drowning. Others, it's kind of like being in the dark. And a lot of questions with that as far as how things can go or will go or maybe even should go with the future of that particular relationship that's involved in that heartbreak or that situation, and so on. At least with this kind of astrological insight and knowledge, at least you can know a few things. First of all, you can be aware of when that type of cosmic weather sets in, so to speak, that type of astrological weather, that kind of life energy, if you will, coming in to your life or into a specific situation. It's usually related to love or money, issues of love or money. But there's this overwhelming feeling of just not knowing. This is why on my website, omsh.net, there's a tarot card that has the Hermit showing the lantern in the night. And so when we see a heartbreak transit like this, we can tell that, first of all, whether it's still going on, that influence, that transit, that energy, or whether it's ended. And in this case, it had ended, and in looking ahead, there wasn't another one. It's just why I was able to console her and say, look, I don't know if you'll be back together or not. And I didn't want to make that prediction, even though I felt there was a good chance. But I didn't want to make that prediction and give a false hope if that was indeed not going to be the case. And I felt that for the process to work as it should in this situation, that it should be an open question. Because perhaps some mistakes were made, and I gave some of my feelings on how I had handled the situation. And in any case, it was comforting to her to know those two things from an astrological perspective. And that is that number one, the heartbreak transit had ended, and number two, the chart was clean and clear. I mean, there was at least a kind of a neutral place, if you will, to take a breath, and to be patient and calm, and to kind of know that the storm was over in that particular area of life, and that particular stress as far as the active energy of that, was over. And so it's a term we use, fallout, is the aftermath of such transits, if you will, that we're often dealing with in matters of love, and sometimes in matters of money too. And so, as it were, 45 days later, after some change in mentality and perception, and with this comfort of knowing that this was, at least from one perspective, an astrological phenomena that had brought some intense stress, breakup stress to the relationship, heartbreak energy. And I can say that they got back together and they're now married. They have a happy, successful marriage. And there was another situation where I was giving consult to a man and a woman that had become boyfriend and girlfriend in a committed relationship. And they were coming upon a period of time in which they were both experiencing quite intense heartbreak transits. But they've had a lot of experience, particularly the one, had a lot of experience with this type of, a few years actually, foresight, astrological knowledge, experience in tracking transits and watching events come and go from not only his life, but the lives of those that he was involved with. And so he was very keen and understood the knowledge very well. And his girlfriend did too, in terms of her hearing from him story after story after story about how this kind of awareness was of real value and made a real difference in their life. And so I had some email confirmation some time ago that they had both passed through a very serious and difficult heartbreak energy, and with their relationship intact. She said that it was difficult. It wasn't easy, and there was a lot of things that did happen that she didn't have time at that time to go into. And she did lose a close friendship, basically, or at minimum it had become very distant and non-communicative, and family had become quite distant. But I'm happy to say that from all indications and what she indicated at that time, they're still together. And so that's the beautiful, positive part of this knowledge. If you're in a storm, if you're in that place of what can be heartbreak, or that kind of energy, that kind of negativity or bad luck, if you will, or just things go wrong or things are tense, if you're aware of it, you can make a conscious choice sometimes, oftentimes, in those particular situations, and better endure that, and you can have a better choice, an awareness of choice, because you can know that it might well be temporary and just only in the stars, so to speak. And so that's a good thing to know, because sometimes there's seasons in a life, whether it's a period of some days or some weeks or some months, perhaps even some years, where things are more difficult, and thus marriages or other types of partnerships or relationships that actually will do quite well together in other ways, or actually have quite desirable and wanted chemistry, would probably better weather such storms or times of temporary heartbreak, so to speak, weather or transits, if you will, if one or both partners had the awareness that that indeed is just a temporary period, it's just a temporary cycle. In another situation, there was a client that I had spoken with who had, we had went forward and looked at a very harsh type of clash, the Saturn-Quincunx Chiron heartbreak transit, and that was coming up, and she had some questions about how this can work, and I said, well, let's go back in time. Let's look at the last time that you had a heartbreak transit in. And so I pointed it out, and the time was November 5th, 2007. And she says, oh my. And then there were several that also ended in 2008 for her. And at the time of this video, it's now December 30th, 2011, and I'm in Tbilisi, the Republic of Georgia. And this was just earlier this week that I was talking to this particular person about her heartbreak transits. And so when I explained to her that she had several in 2008 as well, 3 I think it was, she said yes. She goes, in October of 2007, my sister died. And that was very difficult for her. And subsequently, just shortly after going into 2008, she found some difficulties in a relationship with her boyfriend at that time. And partially due to his response in a way of handling her grief and the situation and so on. And so she actually chose to end that relationship as well. And so it really was a time in late 2007 and 2008 of real heartbreak for her. And so, but that was some years ago, and so this gives her some idea of just how accurate Magi Astrology can be, because this is not something that Western astrology has, or Vedic astrology has the research on, and certainly not the acknowledgement of this particular type of transit. And so I just want to point that out because it's massively important, and that's why Magi Astrology has a great value and a real treasure of knowledge in its modern research of Chiron and the importance of Chiron in the astrology of love and money. In another situation, I had tracked Saturn contra-parallel Chiron, and I asked the woman, in looking back, a short period ago, about that heartbreak transit and its end. And she says, well, you know, that's interesting, because she goes, I almost broke up with my significant other. They're living together. And so that was interesting. So would it have helped her and or him to know that that particular time was a time to be more aware, perhaps even more patient, perhaps even more tolerant, more kind, maybe to employ more negotiating skills, to understand that perhaps the stresses that were going on at that time would soon be able to be looked at and understood perhaps in a different light, or at least with less heartbreak energy involved, if they had just been able to be aware of that. So in another case, the person going through a Saturn contra-parallel Chiron heartbreak transit, I had tracked it for him, and he had been in a foreign country a few times before, and he had a woman there that he loved very much. He very much looked forward to seeing her again. They had spent time together, and he was really looking forward to that. So he had returned there, and they had planned to meet. But when he arrived, she didn't respond to his SMS, his emails, his phone calls. And it's sad to say that he chose, we can say, from his perspective, to close that chapter of his life. And I had a similar situation in terms of a friendship that I decided to close the chapter on. And it was at the end of the same type of heartbreak transit, a Saturn contra-parallel transit. So we can look back in a chart in life, and in this way we can track these heartbreak transits, and that's the best way to learn, is by our own experiences in those times. And then we can look forward, and in sharing like I'm doing here today on this video with you, we can get some idea perhaps of how things can play out in the future, and the types of heartbreaks that can come along. And certainly some of these things cannot be avoided. There's no question that certainly a death, for example, can't be avoided, or the grief about that. Sometimes we can make the conscious choice that we are closing a friendship, or we are closing a relationship, that chapter of our lives. And there's other times where it can, in my opinion, be a type of awareness that can help a relationship to better endure and understand the type of stress and energy that is just there for a short time. And with that understanding, and especially if both partners involved can be active in that awareness, and if they both have the same mutual desire to salvage or save that connection, that partnership, that relationship, I think this knowledge can be of immense value and a true treasure. So, in closing, if you're watching me on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can also reach me at http://universalstar.gs. And my services, astrological consultations, are listed there on the About Me page and the Contact Me page there of my website. And it's very simple to go back in time and track some of these heartbreak transits. Now, I say some because now midpoints, there are midpoint heartbreaks that are, they take more time because midpoints have a very strong effect also, just as strong as planets oftentimes. And so midpoint heartbreaks are not something that we can search for as easily, or they often take more time, and they have to be looked at for specific dates and in a more laborious way. So I've had experience in my life within the last year and a half of experiencing midpoint heartbreak clashes, midpoint heartbreak transits. And those are also very painful and have very real effects in the real world, in my opinion and in my observation. So with that in mind, if you're consulting with an astrologer, or if you're doing your own research, if you're not searching midpoints and checking for midpoint heartbreak clashes or midpoint heartbreak transits, you will find that you're only seeing some, but not all, of the possible heartbreak transits or heartbreak clashes that are there. So that's an important point to know and an important point to remember. So, however, it's usually very informative to go back and just to find the ones in the longitudes and the latitudes, and enough to know from your own experience and your own awareness, once you're given the dates and the times that these transits occurred in your life, the validity and the very real impact that they have on matters of love and money. It's a real treasure and it's a real value to know, looking ahead, when those times may come again. I dare to know. I'm one who wants to know, so that I can try to be spiritually, mentally aware, and strategically, if possible, and prepared to manage such situations. If nothing else, to ease the heartbreak if it's unstoppable, if it's irreparable, and at best, to save a love or a relationship. And that's really what it's all about. The astrology of heartbreak is to try to minimize that heartbreak or to avoid it altogether, if at all possible. Thanks for watching. Enjoy, and don't forget to check out my other videos on my YouTube channel. And again, visit my website and contact me there if you need this type of consultation or this type of astrological research or insight at http://universalstar.gs. Thanks for watching.